At 2 a.m., my brother stole my debit card while I slept. By morning, he'd blown $9,000 on designer sneakers, a PS5, and a brand new iPhone. When I confronted him, my mom snapped, "You're overreacting. He's just a kid." I didn't argue because the account he drained wasn't just money. It was my entire future, and the key to exposing the darkest secret my family was hiding. Before I tell you about the absolute fallout of that morning, let me know where you are watching from in the comments section down below. Grab a warm cup of coffee, sit back, and listen to the whole story, because what happened next still messes with my head to this day. You never really know the people you live with until money is involved. I used to think that was just a cynical saying, something bitter people repeated when things didn't go their way in life. But standing in my own living room, looking at the empty boxes of high-end electronics scattered carelessly across the rug, I realized it was the absolute, undeniable truth. My name is Elijah. I'm 25 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the designated fixer in my family. The guy who quietly cleaned up the messes, paid the bills on time, and swallowed his pride just to keep the peace in the house. I work as a custom woodworker and carpenter. It's an honest, back-breaking living. My hands are permanently covered in rough calluses. My clothes always carry the heavy, earthy scent of cedar and sawdust, and every single dollar I earn is paid for with sweat and aching muscles. I don't come from a wealthy background. I didn't have a massive inheritance waiting for me when I turned 18. Everything I had, I built from the ground up with my own two hands. For the past 4 years, I had been working brutal 60-hour weeks. I took on extra cabinetry jobs on weekends, skipped holidays, ignored my social life, and ate cheap meals just to put money away. I was saving every spare cent into a separate business account. That account held exactly $15,000. It was my escape plan. It was the money I needed to finally sign the lease on my very own commercial workshop, buy professional-grade machinery, and stop working out of a cramped, freezing residential garage. That money was my blood, my tears, and my one-way ticket to independence. And in a matter of 3 hours, while I was dead asleep in my bed upstairs, my 18-year-old brother Mason treated my life savings like his personal lottery ticket. When I saw the gaping hole in my bank balance on my phone screen that morning, my heart didn't just sink. It completely stopped beating in my chest. $9,000. Gone. Evaporated into digital receipts for luxury streetwear, gaming consoles, and an unlocked smartphone. I remember walking down the stairs, my legs feeling like lead weights, the wood creaking beneath my heavy boots. I walked into the living room, and there was Mason. He was sitting on the couch, laughing into a gaming headset, casually unboxing a pair of sneakers that cost more than my first car. My mother, Sarah, was standing in the kitchen, sipping her morning coffee from a ceramic mug and smiling at him. She looked at the pile of expensive boxes and didn't ask a single question. She didn't wonder how an unemployed teenager suddenly afforded the lifestyle of a millionaire athlete. She just smiled. When I held up my phone, my hands shaking with a rage so deep and primal it terrified me, and demanded to know where my debit card was, the room went dead silent. Mason didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just rolled his eyes, smirking like it was a big joke. But it was my mother's reaction that truly broke me. She didn't gasp. She didn't yell at him to explain himself. She crossed her arms, glared at me as if I was the one committing a crime, and delivered the line that shattered our family forever. She told me I was overreacting over just money. She told me to let it go. She actually looked me in the eyes and expected me to just walk away from years of manual labor so her precious boy could play video games in designer shoes. But I couldn't let it go, because they didn't just steal my money. They tried to steal my dignity, and I was about to make sure they paid for it. To understand how we got to this nightmare, I have to take you back. Because this theft wasn't a spontaneous mistake. It was the climax of a lifetime of betrayal. The truth is, the foundation of my family was rotting long before Mason ever touched my wallet. It all started when I was just a kid. My biological father walked out on us when I was 8 years old. It was a messy, bitter divorce that dragged on for months. There were screaming matches in the middle of the night, slammed doors that shook the house, and then a crushing, heavy silence. After the custody battle finally settled, the lawyer handed my mom full control, and my dad vanished into thin air. He didn't pay child support. He didn't call on my birthdays. He didn't even show up for his own mother's funeral a few years later. He just erased us from his existence. My mom, Sarah, was left to pick up the pieces. And for a long while I truly pitied her. I watched her struggle to keep the lights on, working odd retail jobs, crying at the kitchen table late at night over a stack of past due bills. Because I loved her, I stepped up. I was only a kid, but I mowed lawns in the summer, shoveled snow in the brutal winters, and handed over every crumpled dollar bill I earned to help buy groceries for the house. As I got older, I took on heavy construction jobs right after high school let out. I gave up my childhood, my chance to play sports or hang out with friends, just to be the man of the house. I thought that made us a team. I thought my sacrifice meant something to her. But everything changed when I was 12. That was the year my mom met Robert. Robert was a deacon at the local church. He was the kind of guy who wore pressed slacks to the grocery store, shook everyone's hand with a firm, practiced grip, and spoke in a slow, patronizing voice that was supposed to sound wise and authoritative. On paper, he was a savior. He had a decent salary at an insurance firm, a nice 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, and a pristine reputation in the community. My mom married him within a year of meeting him. We moved into his house, and suddenly, the entire narrative shifted. I was no longer the helpful son who kept the family afloat during the dark times. I was the leftover baggage from her failed first marriage. 2 years later, Mason was born. Mason was Robert's biological son. And from the moment they brought that kid home from the hospital, wrapped in a blue blanket, the dynamic in the house was set in stone. Mason was the golden child. He was the living symbol of my mother's fresh start, her perfect new life with her perfect church-going husband. I was just the hired help living in the spare room. The favoritism wasn't even subtle. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. When Mason turned 10, Robert opened a massive college fund for him. I remember sitting at the dinner table, eating dry meatloaf, while Robert proudly announced to the extended family how he was setting Mason up for a life of absolute success. I was 18 at the time, working full-time on a residential framing crew, paying them rent every single month just to keep my childhood bedroom. Not once did they offer to help me with trade school. Not once did they ask about my dreams or my plans. If Mason broke a window playing baseball in the yard, I was blamed for leaving the bat out. If Mason threw a tantrum at a restaurant, I was told to be the bigger person and stop upsetting him. The memory that still burns my blood happened a few Christmases ago. I had saved up for 3 months to buy myself a high-end noise-canceling headset to wear at the loud woodshop. Mason, who was 15 at the time, threw a massive fit on Christmas morning because he got the wrong color of some designer jacket he wanted. In his blind rage, he grabbed my brand new headset off the kitchen counter and smashed it onto the tile floor. It shattered into a dozen unfixable pieces. I was furious. I demanded he pay for it out of his allowance. But my mother rushed into the room, wrapped her arms around him, and looked at me like I was a monster. "He's upset, Elijah. Have some compassion for your brother. Don't be so materialistic." I was forced to apologize to him for raising my voice. That was the unbreakable rule of the house. Mason's comfort always eclipsed my basic rights. I learned to keep my head down, keep my mouth shut, and hoard my money where they couldn't see it. I just wanted to build my business and get out. By the time I was 24, my custom woodworking business was actually starting to gain serious traction. I was getting solid word-of-mouth referrals, building massive oak dining tables, installing custom cabinetry in wealthy neighborhoods, the works. I was exhausted, pulling late nights in the freezing garage, but my bank account was steadily growing. I kept the business account entirely separate from my personal checking. I even opted out of paper statements so Robert wouldn't see the mail, discover my actual salary, and start demanding higher rent to subsidize Mason's lifestyle. During this relentless grind, the only family member who seemed to give a damn about my well-being was my Aunt Chloe. Chloe is my mom's older sister. She was always the sweet aunt, the one who would call me on Sunday evenings just to check in. "Elijah, honey, you sound so tired." She'd coo through the phone, her voice dripping with sympathy. "You're working yourself to the bone. Are your mother and Robert treating you right? You know you can always talk to me. I worry about you in that house." I fell for it. I really did. I was so starved for a sliver of maternal affection, for just one person in my family to acknowledge my hard work, that I poured my heart out to her. I told her about how Mason, now 18, had dropped out of community college after barely 2 weeks. How he was sleeping until noon every day, playing video games all night, and somehow constantly walking around with brand new gear. I told her how frustrated I was that Robert preached about the value of hard work and integrity at church, but fully bankrolled his lazy, entitled son at home. And worst of all, I trusted Aunt Chloe enough to mention my savings. I didn't give her the exact dollar amount, but I told her I was getting very close to signing a commercial lease for my shop. "I'm so proud of you," Chloe had said, her voice warm. "Keep it safe, Elijah. Keep working hard." Meanwhile, back at the house, the red flags were multiplying at an alarming rate. Mason came downstairs one Tuesday morning wearing a pair of limited edition sneakers. I follow streetwear culture a bit just from being online, and I knew for a fact they retailed for over $1,000 on the resale market. I was eating a bowl of cheap cereal at the kitchen island, just staring at his feet. "Where did you get the cash for those?" I asked, my voice completely flat. Mason smirked, grabbing a soda from the fridge and popping the tab. "I have my ways. Stay out of my business, bro." I looked at my mom, who was wiping down the counter with a sponge. "Mom, did Robert buy him those? Because you guys just told me yesterday you couldn't afford to fix the broken water heater." My mom didn't even look up from her scrubbing. "Leave your brother alone, Elijah. He bought them on layaway. He's learning financial responsibility." Layaway. I woke up around 6 a.m. the next morning. I had a strict routine. Wake up, check work emails, check the bank balance to keep myself motivated, get moving. I walked over to my wooden desk to grab my wallet. I kept my business debit card tucked inside a hidden zipper compartment in a leather portfolio, stuffed all the way in the back of my bottom desk drawer. It wasn't a card I ever carried on me because I only used it for major material purchases for the shop. When I pulled the heavy oak drawer open, something felt fundamentally wrong. The portfolio was slightly skewed to the left. The zipper wasn't pulled all the way to the end, the way I obsessively leave it. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I yanked the zipper open and dug my fingers frantically into the hidden pocket. Empty. The plastic card was gone. Panic hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I tore my room apart. I checked my jeans from the night before, my truck console, the bathroom counter, the laundry hamper. Nothing. Shaking uncontrollably, I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app. Face ID unlocked it, and the screen loaded. The large, bold number at the top of the screen made the air leave my lungs. Instead of $15,200, the balance read $6,200. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes, praying it was a glitch in the app. It wasn't. I scrolled down to the transaction history. A tidal wave of charges, all pending, all processed between 2:15 a.m. and 4:45 a.m. There was a charge for $2,200 at an online sneaker boutique, $1,400 at the Apple Store, $800 at a gaming retailer, $1,500 at a designer clothing site. On and on and on. It was a massacre of my life savings. My vision blurred. Someone had stolen my card. But then, a colder, darker realization washed over me, freezing the blood in my veins. This was a business debit card. It required a secure PIN for large purchases, or at the very least, they would need the exact billing zip code and the 3-digit security code. But to bypass the bank's automated fraud alert for sudden, massive midnight spending across multiple websites, they had logged directly into my online banking portal to approve the charges. How? I looked at my security settings on the screen. The password. I had set the password years ago, back when I still believed in the concept of family. It was a combination of my mother's maiden name and her exact birthday. Only someone who knew me intimately, who lived in this house, who had access to my personal documents, could have pieced that together. Only someone who had watched me type it, or snooped through my old notebooks in my closet. It wasn't a random hacker in another country. It wasn't a stolen wallet at a gas station. The thief was sleeping right down the hall. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything at the wall. The rage inside me bypassed hot and went straight to absolute, freezing zero. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. I tapped the button on the app to permanently lock the card. I took screenshots of every single transaction, every timestamp, every vendor. And then, I put on my work boots, walked out of my room, and headed down the stairs to face the devil in my living room. Which brings us right back to that morning. Standing in the living room, looking at Mason and his mountain of stolen loot, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Where is my card?" I demanded again, my voice deathly quiet, the kind of quiet that usually happens right before a bomb goes off. Mason feigned ignorance, a cocky smirk playing on his lips. "I don't know what you're talking about, man. You probably lost it at a lumber yard. Not my problem." I stepped forward, grabbing the shipping label stuck to the side of the massive PS5 box. I ripped it off the cardboard and shoved it directly into his chest. "Billed to Elijah Miller. Shipped to Mason Hayes. You drained $9,000 out of my business account last night while I was sleeping. Give me the card, right now, or I am calling the cops." Before Mason could even open his mouth to lie again, Robert marched into the room. He was wearing his crisp white button-down shirt, getting ready for his important job at the firm. He puffed out his chest, stepping between me and his precious son like a shield. "What in God's name is all this yelling about? Elijah, lower your voice immediately. We do not behave like wild animals in this house." "Your son?" I said, pointing a calloused, bruised finger directly at Robert's face. "Broke into my room, stole my debit card, hacked my bank account, and bought all this garbage. That is felony theft. I want my money back. Now." Robert aggressively glanced at the boxes on the floor, then at Mason. For a split second, just a fraction of a moment, I saw a flicker of genuine panic in Robert's eyes. But he quickly, expertly masked it with righteous indignation. "Now you listen to me," Robert growled, pointing his perfectly manicured finger back at me. "Mason is a good boy. He wouldn't do something like that. If there's a misunderstanding with a credit card, we will sort it out privately as a family. But don't you dare stand in my living room and hurl baseless accusations that could ruin this family's reputation." "Reputation?" I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that scraped my throat. "He's a thief. The evidence is sitting right on the rug. You're looking at it." That's when my mother finally stepped in. I looked at her, desperately hoping that just this once, she would act like a mother to me, that she would see the absolute devastation in my eyes, realize that my entire business, my entire future, was on the line because of her youngest child. Instead, Sarah looked at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. "Elijah, stop this right now," she hissed, her face contorted in anger. "He's 18. He makes mistakes. You have a good job, you make a decent salary, you can make that money back. But if you take this outside this house, if you embarrass us at the church..." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous, threatening whisper. "If you call the cops on your brother, you are dead to me. You will pack your bags, and you will never set foot in this house again." I stared at the woman who gave birth to me. I searched her face for a trace of love, a shred of guilt, a hint of regret. There was nothing, just a desperate, pathetic need to protect her golden child and her perfect suburban lie. The umbilical cord of guilt and obligation that had kept me tied to this toxic family for 25 years finally, permanently snapped. "I'm already dead to you," I said softly. I turned around and walked back upstairs. I didn't hesitate. I walked into my room, locked the door, and immediately opened my laptop. I called the bank's fraud department. The representative was sympathetic but told me the investigation could take up to 90 days. And because the PIN and password were used, there was no guarantee the funds would be fully restored unless I filed a formal police report for identity theft and fraud. So I opened a new tab. I went to the local precinct's website and filed an official police report. I uploaded the screenshots of the transactions. I typed out Mason's full legal name. I provided Robert's address. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. Every keystroke felt like a heavy iron chain falling off my wrists. I must not have been as quiet as I thought. Or maybe Sarah had been standing outside my door listening to my phone call. Because 10 minutes after I hit submit on the police portal, I heard the lock on my bedroom door jiggle violently. Then came the heavy, violent thud of Robert kicking the door open. The wooden frame splintered, sending shards of pine across my carpet. He stood in the doorway, his face purple with rage, his fists clenched. My mother was right behind him, holding a stack of heavy-duty black trash bags. "Get out!" Robert roared, spit flying from his lips. "You ungrateful, spiteful little punk. After everything we've done for you, after we put a roof over your head, you try to destroy my son? Get out of my house right now." My mother started throwing the empty trash bags at me, hitting me in the chest. "Pack your things. You have exactly 10 minutes. If you aren't gone, Robert is calling the police on you for trespassing and threatening us." It was raining outside. A cold, miserable, driving rain that lashed against the bedroom window. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I calmly opened my closet and started throwing my clothes, my work boots, and my smaller hand tools into the bags. I grabbed my laptop, my hard drives containing my design files, and the small metal lockbox containing my birth certificate and passport. As I lugged the heavy black bags down the stairs, Mason was standing in the hallway. He had his new iPhone out, leaning casually against the wall. He wasn't filming, but he had this smug, victorious smirk painted across his face. He had won. He got the toys, he kept the parents, and the annoying older brother was being thrown out with the literal trash. I stopped right in front of him. I didn't touch him. I didn't raise a hand. I just looked him dead in the eye and said, "Enjoy the shoes, Mason. You're going to need them to walk to your court dates." The smirk faltered for a second, his eyes widening slightly, but I didn't wait to see the rest of his reaction. I pushed past him, walked out the front door, and stepped into the freezing rain. Robert slammed the heavy oak door behind me so hard the porch light rattled in its fixture. I threw my bags into the bed of my rusted 2008 Ford F-150. I climbed into the driver's seat, completely soaked to the bone, water dripping from my hair into my eyes. I put the keys in the ignition, and the engine sputtered to life. I sat there for a long time, watching the rain hit the windshield, the wipers squeaking back and forth. I had $6,000 left to my name, no home, and a family that had just betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. But the strange thing was, I didn't cry. For the first time in 25 years, I was completely alone, and it felt incredibly freeing. I slept in my truck that night. I parked in the back corner of a 24-hour diner parking lot, leaning the seat all the way back. It was freezing cold, my neck was stiff, and my clothes were damp, but I felt a strange sense of absolute clarity. When the sun finally came up, casting a gray, miserable light over the parking lot, I bought a black coffee, washed my face in the diner bathroom, and scrolled through my phone contacts. I stopped on a name I hadn't called in almost a year, Dylan. Dylan was a buddy from high school. He worked as a mechanic at a local garage and owned a rundown little house on the edge of town. He was a straight shooter, no drama, just a solid, dependable guy. I hit dial. He answered on the third ring over the sound of an air wrench. I gave him the short version. Massive family drama. Got kicked out in the rain. Needed a place to crash for a few weeks until I could figure out my finances and find an apartment. "Bring your truck around back to my place," Dylan said without hesitating for a single second. "I've got an unfinished basement. It's damp and smells like old laundry detergent. But there's a mattress and a space heater. It's yours for as long as you need it, man." Within an hour, I was moving my trash bags into Dylan's basement. It wasn't much to look at. Concrete floors, exposed copper pipes overhead, and a single tiny window near the ceiling that looked out at the dirt. But it had a solid door with a lock. It was my sanctuary. I set up a small folding table for my laptop and cleared a corner for my hand tools. I wasn't going to let this stop my business. If I had to carve wood and design cabinets in a damp basement, I would do it. A few days went by. I worked like a madman, taking any odd job I could find. I framed a shed, repaired a broken porch, did some minor plumbing, anything to keep the cash flowing while I waited for the bank investigation to move forward. Then, on a Tuesday evening, Dylan came down the wooden stairs, holding 2 cold beers. He tossed one to me. He looked deeply uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Hey man," Dylan started, taking a long sip of his beer. "I was at the sports bar downtown after my shift. You know that shady guy, Ricky? The one who runs the illegal poker games out back of the auto shop." I nodded, popping the tab on my beer, my stomach suddenly tightening. "Yeah, I know of him. Why?" "Well," Dylan said, lowering his voice even though we were alone. "I saw your brother there, Mason. He was carrying a large duffel bag. I overheard him arguing with Ricky in the alleyway behind the dumpsters. Mason was trying to fence a bunch of brand new Yeezys and an unopened iPhone for straight cash. He sounded panicked, man, like terrified. He kept saying he needed to pay off a debt immediately or he was dead meat." I froze. The aluminum can in my hand suddenly felt very heavy. Mason wasn't just a spoiled kid wanting to look cool on Instagram for his friends. He was in trouble. Real trouble. He owed money to the kind of people who break legs and burn cars. And my mother and Robert weren't just indulging his vanity. They were covering his tracks so the church congregation wouldn't find out their perfect, holy golden boy was a degenerate gambler. It all started making a terrifying amount of sense. But if Mason was selling the stuff for cash on the street, he was leaving a trail. And I was determined to follow it all the way to the end. The next morning, I woke up with a singular, burning mission. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was going to be their absolute reckoning. I set up my laptop on the rickety folding table, plugged it into the wall, and cracked my knuckles. Before my parents violently kicked me out, they had always relied on me as the unofficial IT guy for the house. That meant my laptop still had the saved login credentials for the family's shared cloud storage and the main household email account. Robert used it for paying utility bills, and my mom used it for church newsletters and coupons. I opened an incognito window and logged into the shared email. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for, but I started searching keywords. Shipping, order, receipt, tracking, marketplace. Bingo. Hidden deep in the archived folders, I found a flurry of emails from a dark web-adjacent resale marketplace. It was a sketchy site where people flipped high-end goods quickly, often without strict identity verification. But the account wasn't registered under Mason's name. It was registered under a generic, randomized username. I clicked on the profile settings to view the account details. The recovery phone number ended in 4 digits I recognized instantly. It wasn't Mason's number. It was Robert's cell phone number. I sat back in my chair, the concrete walls of the basement suddenly feeling very close and tight. Robert, the holy, righteous deacon. He didn't just know about the theft after the fact. He had actively helped Mason set up a fence account to liquidate the stolen goods for cash. He used my stolen money, my sweat and blood, to bail his biological son out of a gambling debt, all while looking me in the eye and calling me a liar. I started taking screenshots of everything. I documented every IP address, every login timestamp, every linked phone number and email alias. I was building a nuclear bomb of evidence. But the betrayals weren't over. While I was poking around in the email account, I noticed a folder labeled Family Updates. Curious, I clicked on it. It was full of forwarded emails and attachments. I opened the most recent one, dated just 2 days before the theft. It was a series of screenshots from a text message conversation. My text messages. I read the text on the screen. "Aunt Chloe, I'm so stressed. Mason is stealing small things, and Robert is protecting him. I'm close to getting my $15K for the shop. I just need to hold on a little longer. Underneath the screenshot was an email from Aunt Chloe sent directly to my mother, Sarah. Sarah, look at what Elijah just texted me. He's getting suspicious of the boy. He has a lot of money hoarded away in a private account. You guys need to handle Mason's debt situation fast before Elijah moves out and takes the cash with him. I'll keep playing the supportive aunt to see what else he knows. I felt physically sick. My vision swam. I stumbled away from the table, gripping the edge of the cold concrete sink in the corner of the basement. I dry heaved, gasping for air. The one person I thought was in my corner. The one person I poured my heart out to. She was a spy, a snake in the grass, feeding my vulnerabilities directly to the wolves. They had plotted this. They knew I had the money, and they orchestrated the theft to save their precious Mason. I spent 2 days locked in that basement, barely eating, just staring at the printed stack of evidence illuminated by a single harsh bulb. I needed air. I needed to see someone who wasn't actively trying to destroy my life. I texted my cousin Lauren. Lauren was Chloe's daughter, but she had always been a straight shooter, totally different from her manipulative mother. She was an ER nurse, practical, tough, and no nonsense. We met at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. When she slid into the vinyl booth across from me, she looked exhausted. She ordered a black coffee and immediately reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Elijah, what the hell is going on?" she whispered urgently. "The entire family is losing their minds." "What are they saying, Lauren? What's the lie?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering violently against my ribs. Lauren took a deep breath, looking around nervously as if someone might be listening. "Robert and your mom called a family meeting on Sunday after church. They stood in front of everyone. My mom, the uncles, even the pastor was there. Robert put on this whole tearful, heartbreaking performance. He said you had a severe, secret gambling addiction." I let out a harsh, bitter laugh that caused the waitress to look over at us. "A gambling addiction? Me? I work 60 hours a week." "Yes," Lauren said, her eyes full of pity. "Robert claimed that you stole nearly $10,000 from his personal emergency fund. He said he tried to get you help, to stage an intervention in the living room, but you became violent and ran away in the middle of the night. Mom," Aunt Chloe backed him up. "She said you'd been texting her, acting paranoid and demanding money. The absolute audacity of it was breathtaking. They weren't just trying to cover up Mason's crime. They were actively, aggressively framing me to protect their own reputations. In a tight-knit community like ours, a rumor like that was a professional death sentence. It would destroy my woodworking business. No one would hire a violent, gambling-addicted thief to come into their homes to build custom cabinets. My career would be over before it even started." "Do you believe them, Lauren?" I asked, looking her dead in the eye, bracing myself for the worst. She shook her head firmly, her expression fierce. "Not for a single second. I know you, Elijah. You work harder than anyone I know. And I know Mason is a complete train wreck. But you have to understand, Robert has the whole church congregation wrapped around his finger. People are taking his side. If you don't fight back, this lie is going to become your permanent reality." I looked down at the thick manila folder resting on my lap. The folder containing the IP addresses, the dark web receipts, the undeniable proof of Robert's phone number linked to the black market account, the printed proof of Aunt Chloe's disgusting betrayal. "I'm not going to let them write my history," I said, sliding out of the booth. I tossed a $5 bill on the table to cover the coffee. They wanted to play games with my life. They thought they could use me as a scapegoat and throw me away. "What are you going to do?" Lauren asked, looking up at me. "I'm the one who knows how to build things from scratch," I said softly, my voice cold as ice. "And I know exactly how to tear them down." I knew my mother and Robert hosted an annual end-of-summer barbecue for the church congregation. It was Robert's favorite day of the entire year. He loved to stand out on his freshly mowed lawn in a pristine polo shirt, flipping expensive burgers and acting like the wise, generous patriarch of the perfect Christian family. Everyone who was anyone in our local community was going to be there. The pastor, the deacons, the neighborhood watch members, and of course my two-faced Aunt Chloe. It was a Saturday afternoon. The sun was beating down, the air thick with the smell of charcoal and grilled meat. I pulled my beat-up Ford F-150 right up to the curb, parking directly behind Robert's spotless luxury SUV. I didn't bother changing into nice clothes. I was wearing my scuffed work boots, faded jeans, and a plain t-shirt covered in sawdust. I grabbed the thick manila folder from the passenger seat. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but my hands were completely, terrifyingly steady. I walked up the concrete driveway. I could hear the loud laughter, the clinking of glasses, the soft country music playing from the expensive outdoor speakers. I pushed open the heavy wooden side gate and stepped right into the backyard. There were easily 50 people scattered across the lawn. Kids were running around the sprinklers. Adults were standing in circles, holding paper plates loaded with potato salad. Robert was holding court by the massive stainless steel grill, tongs in hand, laughing loudly at someone's joke. Mason was sitting lazily on a lawn chair, wearing the exact designer sneakers he bought with my stolen money, tapping on his brand new iPhone. And my mother was walking around with a silver tray of iced tea, playing the perfect, submissive hostess. It took about 10 seconds for people to notice me standing there. The laughter closest to the gate died down abruptly. Then the silence spread like a drop of black ink in a glass of water. One by one, heads turned. The music suddenly seemed way too loud. Robert looked up from the grill. The arrogant smile instantly melted off his face, replaced by a mask of absolute, ugly fury. He slammed the metal tongs down hard on the side table. He marched right through the crowd of guests, his face flushing dark red, storming straight toward me. "What do you think you're doing here?" Robert hissed, keeping his voice just low enough so the pastor across the yard wouldn't hear him. "I told you that you were never welcome on my property again. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here after what you put this family through. Get out before I call the cops and have you dragged out." My mother came rushing over, nearly dropping her tray of drinks. She grabbed Robert's arm, looking around nervously at the staring guests. "Elijah, please," she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "Don't do this. Don't make a scene. Just go back to wherever you're living and we can talk to a lawyer later if we absolutely have to. Just leave." Aunt Chloe materialized from the crowd, wearing a fake, sickly sweet smile that made my skin crawl. "Elijah, honey, you look so unwell. You're struggling with your demons right now. Let's go out front and talk quietly." I looked at the three of them, the unholy trinity of my misery. I took a deep breath of the smoky air. I didn't lower my voice. In fact, I projected it from my chest so every single person in that backyard could hear me loud and clear. "I'm not leaving," I said smoothly, "and I don't need to talk out front. I think everyone here needs to hear exactly why I was kicked out of my own home in the middle of the night." The pastor, a kind older man named Reverend Thomas, stepped forward cautiously from the crowd. "Elijah, son, Robert told us about your severe gambling struggles. We are all praying for you to find your way back to the light." I looked at the Reverend, my face hard. "I don't gamble, Reverend. I work 60 hours a week building cabinets. I save every penny I make. But a few nights ago, someone in this house stole my business debit card and drained $9,000 from my account while I slept." Loud murmurs broke out across the yard. People shifted uncomfortably, looking at each other. Robert puffed up his chest, taking a threatening step toward me. "He's lying. He's delusional and looking for a handout to fund his addiction. I will not have this violent delinquent slander my son in front of our friends." "I'm not talking about Mason," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a knife. The crowd gasped. Mason, who had finally looked up from his expensive phone, suddenly went completely pale, his jaw dropping. I opened the thick manila folder. I pulled out a stack of printed papers, clipped together in neat, organized packets. I handed the first packet directly to Reverend Thomas. I handed the second one to Aunt Chloe. I held the rest up high for the entire crowd to see. "Mason did steal the card from my room," I said, looking right at Robert's sweating face. "He used my mother's birthday to hack into my online banking. He bought designer shoes, gaming consoles, and electronics. But the part one couldn't figure out at first was why. Mason is a spoiled, lazy teenager, but he's not a criminal mastermind. He didn't know how to bypass the bank's fraud alerts. And he definitely didn't know how to set up an encrypted account on a dark web resale market to fence stolen luxury goods for straight cash." Robert's mouth dropped open slightly. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and gray. He looked like he had just been punched hard in the stomach. "If you look at the second page of that packet, Reverend," I instructed, my voice ringing out over the dead-silent yard, "you will see the IP address and the recovery phone number registered to that illegal fencing account, the account that successfully sold my stolen goods." Reverend Thomas adjusted his glasses, reading the paper carefully. He looked up, his eyes wide with absolute shock. He looked directly at Robert. "Robert, this is your cell phone number, and the IP address is registered to your insurance firm downtown." The collective gasp from the crowd was deafening. Someone dropped a glass. My mother snatched the paper from the Reverend's trembling hands, her eyes scanning the highlighted lines frantically. "Robert owes money," I announced to the crowd, watching his perfect, fake life crumble into dust in real time. "He's been projecting his own sick sins onto everyone else. He has a massive gambling debt, the kind of debt that gets your legs broken in an alley. He knew I had $15,000 saved for my business. He couldn't ask me for it, so he used his own son as a human shield. He told Mason to steal the card and buy the goods, promising to help him sell them. Robert orchestrated the theft of my life savings to pay off his own illegal debts. And then he stood in front of this entire church and told you I was the thief." "That's a lie," Robert screamed, spit flying from his mouth, but his voice cracked pitifully. He looked around wildly at the disgusted faces of his friends. "These are fabricated. He's a computer guy. He faked these documents." "I didn't fake the police report," I said, pulling out the final piece of paper. It was an official document with a bold precinct seal. "I went to the police station this morning with my cousin Lauren. I handed over all this evidence to Detective Wyatt. He pulled the server logs from your office, Robert. He has the surveillance footage of Mason dropping the goods off to a local bookie in an alley downtown. The police are on their way here right now to bring you in for questioning regarding felony wire fraud and identity theft." The backyard erupted into absolute chaos. People were grabbing their children, backing away from Robert as if he had a highly contagious disease. Aunt Chloe dropped the papers on the grass, putting her hands over her mouth, realizing her own daughter had helped me expose this nightmare. Mason stood up from his chair, completely paralyzed with fear, tears welling in his eyes. But it was my mother's reaction that finally, permanently sealed the end of our family. Sarah dropped the tray of iced tea. Glass shattered violently all over the stone patio. She turned to Robert, her face twisted in a horrific mixture of shock and betrayal. She hit him hard in the chest, screaming at him, asking him if it was true. Robert didn't even try to comfort her. He shoved her hands away aggressively, looking desperately toward his house, calculating if he had time to run out the front door. Then Sarah turned to me. She stumbled across the grass, her perfect hostess dress stained with spilled tea and dirt. She reached out, grabbing the front of my work shirt with trembling, desperate hands. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Elijah," she sobbed, her voice cracking painfully. "Elijah, my baby. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know he was behind it. I thought it was just Mason making a stupid mistake. I was just trying to protect my little boy. Please, you have to tell the police to leave us alone. Robert has a good salary, he can pay you back. Please, don't destroy our family." I looked down at the woman gripping my shirt. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I just felt an overwhelming, profound emptiness. I realized that even now, even after knowing that her husband had actively plotted to ruin my life and steal my future, her first instinct was to beg me to protect the family's public image. She didn't apologize for throwing me out in the freezing rain. She didn't apologize for calling me a liar. She just wanted me to clean up the mess. Again, I reached up and gently, firmly peeled her fingers off my shirt. "You didn't know Robert was the mastermind," I said quietly, looking directly into her tear-filled, frantic eyes. "But you knew Mason stole from me. You saw the evidence. And you chose to look the other way. You chose to kick me out of my own home to protect a thief. You chose to tell the whole town I was a gambling addict to save your own reputation." "I was scared," she cried out. "He's your brother." "I don't have a brother," I said, stepping back from her, putting emotional miles between us. "And I don't have a mother. You made your choice, Sarah. Now you get to live with the consequences of it." I turned my back on her. I didn't look at Robert, who was now being angrily confronted by a group of church elders. I didn't look at Aunt Chloe, who was trying to slink away unseen through the side gate. I just walked back down the concrete driveway, got into my truck, and drove away. I heard the distant wail of police sirens approaching the neighborhood as I turned the corner. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The fallout from that afternoon was swift and absolute. Living in a small, tight-knit community means that secrets are the ultimate currency, and a scandal like that is an absolute goldmine. The story spread faster than a summer wildfire. Robert was arrested that same afternoon right on his freshly mowed front lawn, in full view of half the congregation. Because of the digital trail I provided, and the undeniable fact that he used his office computers to facilitate the fencing operation, the evidence against him was ironclad. He was formally charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. He lost his high-paying salary at the insurance firm immediately. His fancy lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the judge wasn't having it. Robert's pristine reputation actually worked against him. The judge made a harsh example out of a community leader abusing his power and exploiting his own stepson. Mason, being 18 and a first-time offender, managed to avoid actual jail time. But his life was effectively ruined. He was placed on strict probation, ordered to complete 500 hours of grueling community service, and forced into mandatory financial counseling. The golden boy had lost his shine. Without Robert's massive income to fund his lifestyle, Mason had to get a minimum wage job scrubbing toilets at a local gas station just to pay his mounting court fees. Aunt Chloe was completely ostracized from the community. When Lauren told the rest of the extended family how Chloe had acted as a manipulative spy, pretending to comfort me while feeding sensitive information to my mother, she was cut out of every holiday dinner and family gathering. But the hardest, most brutal fall belonged to my mother. Sarah had built her entire identity around being the perfect, wealthy, devout wife. Overnight, she became a complete social pariah. The church quietly asked her to step down from all her committees. Her friends stopped returning her calls. The women she used to gossip with at the grocery store would intentionally cross the aisle to avoid making eye contact with her. She was left all alone in a massive, quiet house with a mountain of legal bills, a disgraced husband in a jail cell, and a resentful teenager who blamed her for everything. While their world burned to the ground, mine was finally starting to grow. 2 months after the barbecue incident, the bank's fraud investigation officially concluded. Because I had filed a police report and Robert was formally charged, the bank determined I was not liable for the stolen funds. They couldn't recover everything due to the untraceable nature of the dark web transactions, but they refunded about 80% of my money. It was nearly $12,000. The day that money hit my account, the very first thing I did was drive to the bank and pull out $1,000 in crisp bills. I drove back to the auto shop, walked down into the damp basement, and handed the cash directly to Dylan. "What's this for, man?" Dylan asked, staring at the money in his hands. "That's for the rent, the electricity, and the beers you bought me when I wanted to give up," I told him, looking him in the eye. "You saved my life, Dylan. I'll never forget it." He tried to refuse, but I absolutely wouldn't let him. That same week, I started looking for my own place. I found a small, run-down industrial building on the edge of town. It had a tiny studio apartment attached to a massive, open warehouse space with high ceilings and heavy-duty electrical outlets. It was absolutely perfect. I signed the lease, bought a decent used mattress, and moved out of Dylan's basement. I remember my first night in that new apartment. I didn't have a TV. I didn't have a couch. I just sat on the bare hardwood floor, eating a cheap slice of pizza, looking out at the empty warehouse space where my woodshop was going to be. It was dead quiet. There was no yelling, no slamming doors, no walking on eggshells. For the first time in my entire life, I took a deep breath, and the air didn't feel heavy. I was completely, beautifully free. Rebuilding my life wasn't just about renting a physical space. It was about reclaiming my good name. In the messy aftermath of the scandal, a strange thing happened. People in town who had heard Robert's initial vicious lies about me being a violent gambling addict suddenly realized they had been played for fools. A lot of folks felt immense guilt for believing him without question. To make amends, they started hiring me. Reverend Thomas was the first. He commissioned me to build a massive, solid oak communion table for the church sanctuary. It was a high-profile job, and I poured my absolute soul into every inch of the wood. When it was unveiled on a Sunday morning, the flawless craftsmanship spoke for itself. From there, the word of mouth exploded across the county. I officially registered my business as Pillar Design. I chose the name because a pillar is something that holds immense weight without breaking. It quietly supports the structure around it. That's what I had done my whole life for my toxic family, but now, I was supporting my own dreams. I started getting calls from interior designers, local contractors, and wealthy clients in the next town over. My calendar booked up 6 months in advance. I bought a brand new table saw, a heavy-duty planer, and a massive dust collection system. Within a year, I was making a steady salary that rivaled what Robert used to make at his fancy firm. But unlike Robert, my money was clean. It was built on calluses, deep honesty, and raw talent. That November, Thanksgiving rolled around. Holidays had always been a source of intense, suffocating anxiety for me. It usually meant sitting at Robert's long dining table, eating dry turkey, and listening to him brag loudly about Mason's mediocre accomplishments while completely ignoring my existence. This year was remarkably different. I closed up the woodshop early on Thursday afternoon. I grabbed a homemade apple pie from a local bakery and drove over to Dylan's house. Dylan had invited a bunch of guys from the auto shop who didn't have anywhere else to go for the holiday. Lauren was there, too, having just gotten off a brutal nursing shift at the hospital. Even old Mr. Samuel, the grumpy retired guy who lived next door to Dylan and always yelled at us for playing music too loud, was sitting comfortably in an armchair with a plate piled high with mashed potatoes. We ate off flimsy paper plates. We drank cheap beer. We watched football on a television that had a weird green line running down the side of the screen. We laughed until our sides physically hurt telling stupid, embarrassing stories about high school. I looked around that crowded, messy living room, and a profound realization hit me. Family isn't determined by blood. Blood is just an accident of biology. Blood is what gave me a father who abandoned me, a mother who used me, and a brother who robbed me blind. Family is about loyalty. Family is the people who offer you their damp basement when it's raining outside and you have nowhere to go. Family is the cousin who risks her own social standing to tell you the truth. Family is the people who want to see you win in life, even when they have absolutely nothing to gain from it. I took a bite of warm pie, leaned back on the worn-out couch, and felt a deep, radiating peace settle into my bones. The past is a funny thing. Just when you think you've completely buried it, it tries to claw its way back to the surface. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 14 months after the barbecue confrontation. I was sitting at my drafting table in the shop, sketching out a design for a custom mahogany bookshelf for a new client. The shop was quiet, the only sound coming from the low hum of the space heater and the faint scratching of my pencil on the paper. My phone buzzed loudly on the desk. It was an unknown number. Usually, I don't answer those, assuming it's a client calling late or a spam risk. But something deep inside compelled me to pick it up. "Hello? Pillar Design," I answered professionally. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear ragged, uneven breathing, and then a small, completely broken voice. "Elijah? Is that you?" It was my mother. Her voice sounded thin, aged, and entirely hollowed out. I froze, my pencil hovering over the paper. I hadn't spoken a single word to her since the day I walked away from her on the lawn. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I didn't call her mom. She hadn't earned that title in a very long time. She started crying, a desperate, ugly, gasping sound. "Elijah, please." I didn't know who else to call. "Everything is gone." Robert was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The lawyers took all the savings fighting the case. The bank is foreclosing on the house next month. And Mason packed a bag and left 3 days ago. He won't answer my calls. He stole my wedding ring from my dresser to sell for bus fare. She choked on a harsh sob. "I'm all alone, Elijah. I have absolutely nothing. Please, I know I was wrong. I know I was a terrible mother to you, but you're my oldest son. I'm begging you, can you come help me pack? Can I stay with you just for a little while until I figure things out?" I closed my eyes. A younger version of me, the 12-year-old boy who shoveled snow to buy groceries for her, felt a sharp, painful twinge of guilt. That little boy wanted to drive over there, wrap his arms around her, and fix everything like he always did. But the 26-year-old man sitting in his own successful business, breathing in the scent of cedar and total freedom, knew better. I knew that if I let her back into my life, she would bring the chaos, the manipulation, and the toxic entitlement right back with her. She wasn't calling because she loved me. She was calling because I was the only life raft left on the sinking ship, and she was drowning. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Sarah," I said, my voice gentle but as hard and unyielding as steel. "But I can't help you. You made your bed when you chose Robert and Mason over me. You threw me out in the rain to protect a thief. You don't get to run back to the son you abandoned just because the son you spoiled finally turned on you. Elijah, please, your family. You can't do this," she begged frantically. "No," I replied softly. "I'm not. Goodbye, Sarah. I wish you the best." I hit the end call button. I didn't even block the number. I immediately went into my phone settings, canceled my current service plan, and ordered a brand new phone number. I wiped the slate completely, permanently clean. I put my pencil back down on the paper, took a deep breath, and went back to drawing. My hand didn't shake once. I am 26 years old now. It's a Tuesday morning. The bright sun is streaming through the massive industrial windows of my commercial woodshop. The air is thick with sawdust, floating like tiny golden stars in the shafts of light. My heavy machinery is humming in the background, a beautiful, powerful sound that means I am busy, I am highly profitable, and I am alive. I'm standing here, running my hand over the smooth, sanded edge of a solid walnut dining table that a client is paying me $10,000 to build. I built this. I built this entire business, I built this life, and I built the strong man I am today. Looking back, I realized something incredibly important. For a long time, I thought the worst thing that ever happened to me was my family stealing my money and breaking my heart. I thought I was a victim, but I wasn't a victim. I was a prisoner who had just been handed the key to his own cell. Sometimes, the people who share your blood are the very people who will bleed you dry. Society constantly tells us that family is everything. We are told to forgive, to forget, to turn the other cheek, to endure emotional abuse and financial exploitation simply because the person hurting us happens to share a last name. We are told that honoring your mother and father is a blank check for them to treat you like garbage. It is a lie. Loyalty is earned, respect is reciprocal, and love should never, ever require you to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. They thought they were destroying me that morning in the living room. They thought they were taking away my future and putting me back in my place. But what they actually did was cut the heavy iron anchor that was dragging me to the bottom of the ocean. By betraying me so completely, they gave me the ultimate permission to walk away without a single ounce of guilt. They took my money, but they handed me my freedom, and I have never looked back. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a heavy one, and it wasn't easy to talk about, but it's something I felt deeply compelled to share. I hope this resonated with you in some way, especially if you've ever felt invisible or unappreciated by the people who were supposed to love you the most. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, where you had to make the agonizing choice to walk away from toxic family members to save your own sanity? Please, share your stories down in the comments. I read them and I know they help others feel less alone. If you made it all the way to this exact moment, you belong to a very special group. I want you to go down to the comments right now and type the letter W for winner. This is our secret code. It's the sign of the 1% Club. The resilient, amazing people who watch until the very end. The people who understand that walking away from abuse doesn't make you a quitter. It makes you a winner. It lets me know exactly who my true supporters are. If my journey touched you today, please hit that like button, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing these incredible, real-life stories together. Stay strong, keep building your own life, and I will see you in the next one.